coming next to our microphone, to our stage, is Caitlin Langone.
In the NYPD, there is a saying that when people need help, they call the police, but when the police need help, they call the emergency services unit. And my dad was one such officer. He worked in the NYPD's Emergency Services Truck 10. He was also a volunteer firefighter in his hometown on Long Island, a FEMA rescue worker who specialized in collapsed space rescue, and an EMT. So you could say that rescue was kind of Daddy's life. When I was a little girl, Daddy was a very larger-than-life personality to me. He was a very tall man at like 6'3". He had really big hands. He used to say, "Hands like frying pans," when we played football. His hands were so big that I could only fit my hand around his ring finger and his pinky when we'd cross the street. You know, he was like Superman to me. He was just this giant, like, Mighty Mouse figure that I loved so much in life, and he loved rescue work so much that his colleagues actually called him Captain Adrenaline at work. So when 9/11 actually occurred, I was 12 years old. I was in school. I was in my favorite class of the day in science. My favorite teacher, Miss Agno, really, really bright, happy-faced lady. And the principal came in that day with a letter. And she walked over to Mrs. Agno, and she said, you know, they had a conversation. And then I remember the smile on Miss's face just disappearing, and her looking very serious all of a sudden, which was very unusual. And she turns to the class and she says, "A plane has just hit the World Trade Center." And at 12, I was not too familiar with what the World Trade Center was. I thought the Twin Towers and World Trade were two different buildings. But all I remember thinking was, well, two things. First of all, this is a very strange accident. How does something like a plane hit something that's 110 stories high? And the second thing I thought was, no, surely Daddy's going. Because of his capacity as an ESU officer and a FEMA rescue worker, Daddy had gone to the 1993 bombing of World Trade, and had also gone to the 95 bombing in Oklahoma City. So I knew he would be going, I was sure of it. But I thought he'd go, and he'd help out and do his rescue, and he'd come home like he always does. So that was around 8:45, 8:50 in the morning when we got the news. Did not hear anything for the rest of the day. Teachers refused to turn the televisions on. All I had heard was one plane hit the World Trade Center. Come lunch. I go to my lunch table, and there's a girl I know who's sitting at the very far end of the table, and she is hysterically crying. She has snot coming down her face is red, she is just hysterical. And I don't even really care for her that much. You know, we are not friends, we're not somebody, you know, we didn't even speak that much. But seeing her so upset and just so scared for her dad, because he worked on the 104th floor, the North Tower for Cantor Fitzgerald, really upset me, and I felt really awful. So I went to her and I said, "Don't worry, Mary Ellen, people like my dad are coming. No one's gonna leave them alone. Someone's gonna come get them and get them out. It'll be okay." And I really believed it. I was sure that everything would be fine, like it always was. So I got home around like 2:30 in the afternoon. That was the first time I actually saw the attacks, because I got to turn on the television to see what Miss Agno would not let us see. And growing up in a rescue household, I was a little used to things like this. I was aware of Oklahoma City, so I remember watching it fascinated, not too worried, again, really, just watching the paper fall down like confetti. And I wasn't even really listening to what the reporters were saying. I was just so mesmerized by what was on the television that, you know, it didn't really occur to me that this was all post, you know, this had already happened. And it also didn't occur to me that while I was watching the South Tower fall down and collapse, I was watching Daddy die. And when the North Tower collapsed not too long after, that was when Uncle Peter, my uncle and my father's brother, died as well. So, you know, we had no idea. And then you fast forward maybe a week later, and we were at home, my brother and I, and my mother got a phone call that she went outside to take. And she came back inside, and I knew something was very, very wrong, because she looked and was acting a lot like Mary Ellen did. She didn't say a word to us. She just came over and grabbed my brother and I to us in this really tight hug and held us to her. And Brian was silent. Brian was 10 years old, silent, looking off in his face, and I just kept saying, "No, no, 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 no." Like nobody had to say anything, I just knew. And then I managed to escape off to my room. And for a long time it was a lot of waiting. It was just, "Tommy's missing." You know, his partner came to the door and told us, "Tommy's missing, but don't worry, he's a collapsed space rescue specialist. There's voids, there's air pockets, there's places that they're surviving, they're down there, they're somewhere." And they told us that as they would dig, and every day they would tell us that, but every day that passed, it got more and more clear that they probably were not coming back, because it started to be 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, And then it finally came to the point in October where we decided to have a joint funeral. And it's a tradition in firefighting communities that they will have 2 ladder trucks come and bring both the rigs and raise both ladders and hang an American flag between them. And we followed about a mile under all of these trucks that were doing that down to the funeral at the church, passing in front of a whole wall of firefighters and cops in their dress blues and kids singing God Bless America. And, you know, it didn't really hit me until we left the funeral, which, you know, we had no coffin to bury either Uncle Peter or Daddy because we never found them. We only found the top of Daddy's gun and his handcuffs. But after it happened was when it really started to hit home, when I was listening to Amazing Grace and I saw the helicopters flying by in the missing man formation. It started to make sense that Daddy really wasn't coming back for good, or ever actually. But time moves forward, so does life. September 11th becomes September 12th, and so on and so forth. And I started to think, as time moved on and I started to come to terms with this, how can I honor Daddy's legacy, everything he taught me? How can I honor how much he meant to me, but in a capacity that I was excelling at? And then I remember we'd always shared the love of dogs. Daddy was raising our puppy TJ, who he named after himself and Mommy. Dog's name means Tommy and Joanne. TJ. so I thought to myself, well, there's TJ, and he raised TJ and taught me along TJ, and I love dogs. So I said to myself, why don't I become a dog trainer? And then I found out about this great school where you can train service dogs. So I thought to myself, well, Daddy loved to help people. I'm sure not brave enough to chase after people with guns. So how can I help in my way? I said to myself, I will become a service dog trainer. I'll train psychiatric service dogs to help the veterans from Iraq and Afghanistan. It's kind of as a way of paying it forward, thank you for what they did for us after 9/11. You know, because I wanted to emulate and honor Daddy without trying to be him. And I think that's one of the best ways, because he was very much a, you know, why are you crying kind of a guy. So I figured instead of sitting around moping, I'll try to help people like he did.